Hi, I'm Cynt Marshall, and I am back with my friend Boo with ConnectSafely, and we just want to get into round two and talk about a few more things. So thank you for rejoining us.
Of course.
I want to talk about influencers because we know that a lot of young people are into that now. Talk about that, the positives of it, and how we can advise them to keep that area safe for them.
Right. I mean, it's a viable way to create community and be part of a community, right? I think one of the most interesting things about influencers and following somebody is the community part, right? So think about when we think of the online experience and some of the possible negative stuff, but really the positives are, for example, for a kid in like rural Idaho, right, who might be LGBTQ or wondering, right, and then feel like maybe they don't feel safe in their own, in their small town to kind of have those conversations. They can find places online that are very supportive, right, and where people have research and have experience, and they can be like, we will be that family for you, right,
be part of a community,
right, or thinking about, I mean, we're here in Texas, thinking about like an immigrant who might, or like a person, just from like a poor neighborhood who doesn't feel maybe safe to go outside and like in their own space, right? For whatever reason,
right?
Then you find these places online, through whether it's through influencers, travel, you get to dream, right?
Yes. Positive connection.
Yeah, and I've done some work with Native American tribes, and a lot of the thing is for them is like some isolation, right? And so they get to think about like, oh, here's like what if I did go to France, right? Like what if I did, didn't have to just spend my whole life here, on this resin. What if I ate these foods? Or, those are the real positive things that can happen, and it's for all of us. As far as I think supporting, kind of the if you have a teen who's like wanting to be an influencer, that's interesting, right? Because now you've got somebody who is going to be much more public facing.
Right.
We know that there's going to be trolls. We know there's going to be people who are going to counter what they say and maybe they'll make their own video about how they don't like this influencer, they don't like this. And that can be really scary. I think when your son or daughter starts being made fun of online, you're like, wait, I want to go. Your instinct comes up, right? You're like, I want to go.
Right, because once you put yourself out there, you're putting yourself out there for all kind of criticism, all kind of stuff.
Right. I mean, ask anybody, right, who has a public presence, right? People will come for you, and a lot of times it's real people. A lot of times it's bots, right? There's a lot of these bots out there, and I think when we say bots, we're talking about real actual people set them up, obviously, but it's these farms. You maybe have seen the pictures of like the farms in China with all the phones and stuff, and it really is just often it's just like bad actors wanting to influence our behavior, right, and change who we are.
But it's not real.
It's not real.
It's not real.
Right.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is because often, especially in the past, we think this human trafficking problem is just exploiting girls, women. Let's talk about the whole picture of it because young men are caught up in that too. So let's talk about that.
Oh gosh, absolutely. I mean, young men. There's research that says that young men actually are more likely victims of sextortion, and it comes from like a pretty girl sends you a photo, and you're like, hey, and it's a little easier for them to be like, well, maybe it's real, right? Like, and you hope that it's real, and so they are kind of there's a kind of extortion part of it,
right?
And then there's this other thing that's happening right now that's kind of insidious, and that's so we young women have the beauty standards have existed forever for young women or for women at at any stage of life. They're starting to exist very much for men now, for boys, right? So whether we're talking about like the looks maxing stuff, like this, you might have heard of like bone smashing, literally people who are like men who are like they spend all their time just like working out and getting fit, and that's becoming not even like I'm not even talking like Brad Pitt fit. I'm talking like kind of weird, like very weirdly perfect, right? There's a lot built into it,
Perfection is a big thing now.
Exactly, right? Which is crazy, right? Because I feel like in some ways, just I'm a child of the '90s, and like I thought we'd gotten away from it. I thought we were making progress, but now there is this behavior that's kind of pulling young men back in. And a lot of it has to do with money, so, then you see these guys driving Lamborghinis and they drive their friends, and that people are like, oh, I want that. And so that can seem attractive. Some of it's politics. There's a lot of different reasons for it, but but young men are certainly, when I talked earlier about the change of behaviors, I think that's somebody to look out for specifically. If you have a boy who's just always been sweet and caring and, loves whatever, like, art and making, and all of a sudden they're like they're speaking differently, and you don't really understand what they're saying. You know what I mean? And it is kind of that same kind of like change in behavior that I was talking about.
Right. So we have to pay attention to all of our young people.
Oh,
In behavior with all of them.
I think so.
Okay. Terrific. Anything else you want to kind of wrap up with?
Yeah. Earlier I was thinking about we're not just raising kids. We're raising kids, but we're also raising adults.
Yes.
So we're raising people who will hopefully go on to understand these pretty nuanced times and complicated times that we live in a better way. They'll be better prepared for that adulthood that they're stepping into. And I think that that's something to remember, especially because there's just so much flying at you. Like when you think about the internet, like just the noise of the online experience, it can feel really overwhelming. And just keeping in mind as a parent, as a caregiver, as an educator, like we're raising these young adults who will be able to make these decisions on their own one day.
And that's part of our role, is to nurture that.
Absolutely.
I love our young people. They are brilliant. I love the fact that they are technologically savvy. My husband was big on making sure they had devices in hand just so they would know what to do.
Yeah.
But our job as the big people is to make sure we take care of these young people and keep them safe and protect them.
Yeah.
And you do that every day at ConnectSafely. And our chapter of the Links, I love these people and what they have done with this whole campaign and this episode, all these episodes of It's Not What It Seems.
Yeah.
Our job is this is how we love our young people.
Yeah.
So thank you for loving our young people.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. Yeah. And learning from them as well, right? Like
Yes.
learning. Yeah, it's cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.